I'm starting to realize that I, possibly you, and maybe even the folks at OpenAI are thinking about ChatGPT all wrong. It's not a knowledge-based search engine, it's more a knowledge-based reasoning engine. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So today I'm going to talk about ChatGPT from OpenAI as sort of an exemplar of large language models. So just know that there's an asterisk behind when I say ChatGPT that includes things like Bard and Llama and Alpaca and on and on and on. But rather than having to continuously say ChatGPT plus Bard plus blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to use ChatGPT just because it's easier to say that. So anyway, just understand that there's always an asterisk behind that when I'm using it, and I'm not referring only to ChatGPT when I refer to this stuff. All right, so what am I talking about here today? Well, what I'm talking about is dialing things back to the introduction of the internet actually, the internet has existed since the 1960s, early 70s, sometime in there, and I actually used it in the early 1980s myself. But the internet that gained popularity in the mid 1990s when the World Wide Web came into existence, that version of the internet has grown from being something that people talked about. If you go back to broadcasts at the time, people are like, this is a fad, it'll go away really soon, blah, blah, whatever. They say things like that, but what really happened was it turned into a lot of things, but one of the most important aspects of the internet right now is it is a repository for most of the knowledge of humanity, or at least very, very much of it. Yeah, there's still a lot of stuff that's analog. There's still a lot of stuff that's in the physical world that is difficult to translate into something like the internet, which is text and video based primarily. But the internet has a massive amount of human knowledge. So that truly is kind of a knowledge base. Now, of course, you can go search for something and you can find completely incorrect information about it all over the place, because part of knowledge is not just factually correct knowledge, but also factually incorrect knowledge. And of course, speculation on things that people don't know the correct answer to and all of that. But at heart, the internet really is a kind of a searchable knowledge base of all human knowledge. And that's really, really cool. And it's the amazing aspect of it. It's actually foundationally important. And one of the really important aspects of that is the sort of digital haves and have-nots, which I think is one of the reasons why Starlink is the most impressive to me. Is what it's doing is starting to balance that out to some extent. Remote areas of the world that didn't have access to high-speed internet now, hopefully for a reasonable charge for these areas, because a lot of them are underdeveloped in terms of having a lot of money and so forth. But hopefully at least communities will be able to afford to purchase Starlink or other alternatives to that if they so choose. But having access to high-speed download and upload internet means that people have access to the World Wide Web, which means that people have access to this vast knowledge base that the world contains. And having that access allows people to educate themselves very rapidly and to come up to speed and be able to make changes to the world much more quickly than was possible 30 plus years ago. And of course, me being as old as I am, I certainly remember the time before the internet became a big thing, although it is actually difficult now to comprehend how it must have been then. Even though I lived through it, like kind of half my life was pre-internet, it's difficult for me to really even comprehend anymore how drastically everything was changed. How you used to have to go to the library and used to have to go through the little card catalog and look up things and try to find books and so forth, and then read the entire book. And if the library that you were at didn't happen to have the particular book that you wanted or needed for learning a particular topic, you were just out of luck, or you could ask for interlibrary loan or something, and you could wait 2 weeks and hopefully get the book eventually. So, it was a very different world. Now it's just a couple of seconds of clicking on Google or Bing or something else and finding it out. And that, of course, brings us to ChatGPT / the other large language models. That is a place that people are now like, hey, rather than go search the internet, what I'm going to do is ask ChatGPT a question about something like this. And people are replacing the internet. They're thinking of ChatGPT as a replacement for the internet, a more convenient version of the internet, so that you don't have to go on Google and you don't have to type the thing in, and then you don't have to scan the 15 articles that are at the front of this or the 15 recipes or whatever it is. You don't have to look through it yourself. You can have a large language model do that for you. But what I want to argue here is that just like the internet seemed like a direct replacement for libraries back at the beginning, but it ended up being so much more and the paradigm was so different, people didn't understand that in the mid 1990s. And that's why they thought it was a flash in the pan. They didn't realize the commercial and intellectual potential of the internet because they thought it was just going to be a kind of a one-to-one replacement for the library. Well, just like that, people currently are thinking of ChatGPT and the like as a direct replacement for the internet, simply a different, better interface to the internet. And that's not what this is going to be best at. This is not a one-to-one replacement. It is less of a knowledge-based search engine, as I said in the introduction, and more of a knowledge-based reasoning engine. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take a human being, any human being. We are reasoning engines. We are not great. We have a lot of knowledge, but we're not great at remembering every particular detail, which is why things like books and the internet now are so important to us. But what we can do is we can reason about it. If somebody says, take this concept from this book and this concept from this book, and then something that you learned in school 12 years ago, combine those all together into a new idea, we have the capability of doing that. And speaking of which, if I can actually point to it, it's very difficult right there. Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 is right there back on my bookshelf. If you haven't seen my Twitter exclusive video, I did a video about all of the stuff back here. So you can go join Twitter as a subscriber to me and you can check out that video. But anyway, that book is back there particularly because it involves going from nothing to an idea to creating the basics of a business. Now, that's certainly in the business world, but the very idea of creativity is this ability for humans to be able to pull disparate ideas together and to synthesize them into something brand new that has never been done before. And that is kind of our superpower. And what that is a reasoning / creativity engine rather than just a searchable knowledge index. So if we look at the internet, that's a searchable knowledge index with a lot of human knowledge in it, but it doesn't have reasoning capability built in. We provide the reasoning capability. We can pull these disparate strands together and we can then reason with them. We can create with them. Then we can come up with new ideas. We can plumb the depths of a book like, Milton's Paradise Lost or something like that. We can do whatever we want to with this knowledge, but we are the reasoning aspect of this, and the sort of giant database is the internet. And people want to use ChatGPT as just an interface to the internet, a knowledge-based interface. And people get very upset when ChatGPT hallucinates, which is what people call it, which is basically coming up with factually incorrect or counterfactual information. It's really good at creating like archive articles that don't exist. It'll have the author's name, it'll have a great title, it'll give you the URL, all of that kind of stuff. And then you go search for it and it doesn't actually exist. But it's amazing at hallucinating these kinds of things. ChatGPT, like human beings, is incredibly creative. It actually is able to synthesize a lot of knowledge, but what it's not great at is being always factually correct. So it's not like a database of the universe. It's more of something that's just, imagine a human that has an amazing amount of stuff stuffed in his or her head. So it's like a Dr. Know-it-all on steroids, on steroids, on steroids. So, multiple orders of magnitude more than I would ever know. It is a thing that just knows all of this stuff, and it's compressed that information down into a really interesting multi-dimensional vector understanding of the universe. It's compressed that. And if you haven't seen my video on that, I highly recommend watching that. These things are never all that popular. I don't know why, because they're actually really, really important to think about. But anyway, I highly recommend watching that video as well, because it talks about how these large language models are compression algorithms for reasoning, for understanding. But what I want to argue here is that far from being a fault with ChatGPT, hallucinations are actually the coolest aspect of it. It's what we humans do. If you don't know the answer, a lot of times you'll just make it up. Sometimes you'll say like, oh, I don't know the answer to that. But sometimes if you're pushed into a corner, you'll just kind of make up the answer. Just imagine a test where you didn't read the book, or at least you only half read the book or something, and the professor asked you to write an essay about that, and you just start BSing. You're just like, well, I'm just going to do the best I can, imagining what this second half of this book might have been like, and make up an essay about that. We're pretty amazing at filling in the blanks of a very sparse knowledge base. And so you can see ChatGPT doing the same thing. It's like, I don't know the answer, so I'm just going to make it up. I'm going to, predict the next word and figure out what's going to make the human being who is asking me questions happy. So just like with a professor and a student, ChatGPT is like a student to you. It's like it doesn't want you to be angry at it. It wants to give you information that makes you happy, which is that alignment issue. And OpenAI and a lot of other companies have spent a lot of effort to align these large language models to make them feed you information that will make you happy. But what that means is that if it doesn't have information at hand, it will just make it up to try to make you happy. And I don't find fault with this. I actually think it's fascinating. But the problem is that people are trying to use ChatGPT in the wrong way. We're trying to use it like the internet. We already have the internet. We can go out and search this information and find it ourselves. What we want is an entity that will reason out the information that it gets from the internet. So just like the internet grew to be so much more than just an easily searched library, what I'm saying here is that ChatGPT is so much more than just an easy access mode to get into the internet. Now, currently there are problems, particularly with ChatGPT, because it's not connected to the internet, so it's not able to search things easily. And what needs to happen in order to make this as effective as possible is to give it live access to the internet, and Bard and Bing have sort of done that already. Although I would say not particularly successfully. But remember, these are super, super early days to this. If you go back to 1994 when the internet first existed, the World Wide Web version of the internet, it was pretty, primitive and pathetic at that point. And it took a few years and a dot-com bubble and all of that kind of stuff to really ramp it up to start to see the real potential of it. So it is going to take a little bit of time to really dig into this. But what I'm predicting is that we're going to see a paradigm shift again. Just like the internet did not replace libraries, it actually extended them and made an entity which is much, much grander than any library ever could have been. What we're going to see with ChatGPT is not a replacement of the internet that we have now, but a new thing that is much grander. It's more like having a polymath that you can talk to, an incredibly intelligent, well-read human that you can have a conversation with. And those kinds of things are the most satisfying for me with ChatGPT and the like, is having a conversation with it, a creative conversation, a reasoning conversation. And if you want more factual information, you can prompt it with the facts that you're interested in. So you can go search the internet, and hopefully eventually we will have that with ChatGPT. What you can do is say, here's information that I'm interested in now. Like Andre Karpathy just did this just today, I think it was, or maybe yesterday. He posted about this. He said you can feed it this information and give it a pre-prompt, and it will come up with multiple choice answers with really good alternative answers, so that the student would have a difficult time knowing what the correct answer was from the multiple choice, and for making flashcards and other things like that. So you can utilize this to reason on information that you give it, or eventually when it gets better at integrating internet search and understanding how to do that. And yes, ChatGPT is already growing that ability through, reading links and things like that already. And we have entities like LangChain which do an okay job at it at this point. None of these things work particularly well just yet, but we will get the ability soon, we'll get a more seamless ability to interact with the internet through ChatGPT, at which point it will stop hallucinating as much. But I actually think that's to some extent a downside to it, because I think it's going to drive people to use ChatGPT as an alternative to just doing Google or Bing search or something like that on the internet. What we need to do is think about this more as a conversational partner, as a research partner, as a creative partner, someone who can help us write books, someone who can help us come up with new scientific theories, someone who can help us to come up with new business ideas and to grow a business into a viable, entity from just that original idea. These are the places that something like ChatGPT are really going to shine, and people need to embrace that and understand that it's much more creative and reasoning and thinking. It's more like that. So it's more like a person, because again, we have imperfect memory as always. I'm sure that I don't remember half of what I learned in calculus in like 11th and 12th grade back in high school. And probably that same is true for you, unless you do it every day or something. It just kind of goes away. But I have the basic memory of it, and I know the basic facts of it. Well, ChatGPT has a lot better knowledge than I do about that, because it remembers things much more perfectly, but it's not going to remember it perfectly, and it's not going to be able to recall it perfectly. But we have other entities to do something like that, and we're misusing an entity like ChatGPT, if we're only asking it for factual information and getting mad at it when it doesn't produce factual information, that's not the best way to utilize something like this. It's much more of a creative conversational partner rather than just replacing the internet. It's pretty easy to go search on Google or Bing these days and look up the answer to something. It's not that complicated. What we really want at this point is something that will reason with us and will be creative with us and utilize that information to the best possible ability. And that's where large language models really shine, and that's where the future of all of this is going, I predict. All right, so if this wasn't clear at this point, this was entirely speculation and entirely my speculation. So I'm not representing anybody else here, just my own random thoughts, which may be the ramblings of a madman. So take it or leave it. But I'd certainly be interested to know what you all think about this. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think. And, we can start a conversation ourselves. We can be the human version of ChatGPT having a conversation about this. In the meantime, if you did enjoy this, please do like the video so YouTube's AI algorithm knows that it should be served to other people. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. Like I've been saying, I'm trying to do kind of an 80-20 split between Tesla specific information and more generalized AI stuff. This is obviously one of the more generalized AI videos, and thank you so much for watching it. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my Twitter subscribers. Thank you all for helping to make this channel possible in whatever way you can. And even if that's just watching the videos and liking them, I appreciate that very much as well. And of course, if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.